All right, my English teacher friends. So I have a very interesting synthesis unit that I've cobbled together over the last couple of days. And ultimately, as I stare down the barrel of going back to school, I'm trying to figure out how to juggle just my classroom routines in terms of getting, the content and the skills all set up, but also balancing some SEL integration. And it all seems sort of piecemealed together the way that it's been presented to me, at least. And so I'm trying to just scheme up some ways to put the instruction and the SEL together so that everything seems I don't know, more cohesive than it did for me last year. So, in this particular piece, we're going to give a bit of advice to our friend Oscar the Grouch, incorporating a number of SEL components and ultimately getting to the heart of how do we construct a synthesis essay while manipulating and pulling the strings of my templates. So let me show you the packet that I put together that contains the synthesis materials. So let me pull that up real quick just to give you a sense. All right, so I'll go over the prompt in just a second. But source A is a music video that Oscar the Grouch made himself called I'm Sad Because I'm Happy. And I just think it's good, fodder to do some diction analysis of that. So I have the link to the video and the link to the lyrics. I have a fantastic article that takes a look at a theory or a concept called negaholism. So the concept that you can basically become addicted to negativity. So that's source B. I have a lot of sources on here. Ultimately, you as the classroom instructor can figure out which ones you want to use. Dave Ursulo is really big in the SEL community, 6 Ways to Break Any Cycle of Negativity. So all good concrete things. And a lot of these suggestions came from the AP Lang Facebook group. 5-minute guided meditation to release negative thoughts and emotions, a YouTube video. So I actually have the kids go through a meditation. Source E, bad mood, 10 ways to overcome a bad mood, which we see a lot of in our friend Oscar the Grouch. And goes on here, the power of positive thinking is source F. So really wanted to work with text, written text, but got into some other funky things here. Source G, a fun test using Plutocic's Wheel of Emotions. So I have my students going to this link here where they have some things to read, some things to watch, and some things to do, where they're actually going to do an inventory of their own emotions. It's very fascinating, and then they can do it for Oscar as well. Plenty of stuff here, probably too much. You can, again, pick and choose what you want to use depending on your kids, their interest, and their skill level. And I think I have one more. It's somebody in the Facebook group sent me this one, Oscar the Grouch personality type. So to introduce personality types, we got a synopsis of Oscars, and there's an EQ test that students can run through here as a possible source for their essay. So lots and lots and lots of stuff. So clearly I got to source J. We don't need all that stuff. So you figure out what's best for you and your students and run from there. So at this stage of the game, let's jump into the prompt and see where the templates are going to lead us. So here's the prompt. Our dear friend Oscar the Grouch is really entrenched in a heap of negativity. No matter what, everything is doom and gloom for him. In fact, he just sent you a text that reads, "You'd be a grouch too. if you lived in a trash can. Read the following sources and accompanying material carefully. Write a letter to Oscar giving him a bit of advice on how to find a slice of happiness in his day. Draw from at least 3 of the sources. So easy peasy, easy peasy. So the big thing with my templates is this, and it's kind of at the heart of my textbook. The question, what if we taught composition like Bob Ross teaches painting? So I always give this analogy in my videos, and I'll provide it again just to illustrate that there's a huge fundamental difference between the assigning of writing and the explicit teaching of it. So if Bob Ross comes onto the screen and says, "Hello, happy little people, today we are going to paint a beautiful New England autumnal landscape with beautiful fall foliage. And in the center of our canvas, we're going to include an old rickety wooden New England wood-covered bridge. On your mark, get set, go." That's not good teaching, right? Bob gets right to the canvas and the easel, and he explicitly shows us step-by-step how to construct that painting. And that's what good composition instructors do as well. They get to the proverbial easel and canvas and they write with their students. I think it's really imperative that teachers position themselves as the expert writer in the classroom and use a template, just like Bob Ross did. He used something called the wet on wet technique every single time he ever painted. And with me, it's declarative inverted for the thesis and syllogistic for the body paragraphs. So every single time, no matter the expository mode, no matter the essay, no matter the genre, same templates every single time. So it gets us to this question. How then do I write the introductory paragraph? Well, we're doing synthesis, so we have a 50-50 coin flip. We can either declare the thesis or invert it. And for those that are familiar with my work, you know that for rhetorical analysis, I always have my students declare. For literary analysis, they invert, but for argument, persuasion, synthesis, and research, it's a coin flip. It does not matter. So with me Bob Rossing some of these, I found that a certain approach worked better than the others. And that's, again, the importance of running through your assignments before giving them to your students to figure out. I was able to figure it out for my students in advance and kind of troubleshoot some things. So in the declarative model, you begin with the thesis, just boom, out of the gate, drop your advice to Oscar right out of the gate, as succinctly, concisely as possible. From there, you flesh it out with a little bit of context and background. Ideally, since it's an academic paper, but you're writing a letter to ostensibly a friend, so you don't want to overdo the tier 2 level vocabulary, but it is an academic task nonetheless. So I do want to see, a modicum of tier 2 level words. And what I mean by that is just your simple average run-of-the-mill SAT caliber word. So I do a word study academy, an intensive word study academy with my students all academic year. So their vocabs augment nicely over the course of the year with me. And then sentence constructs. For voice, rhythm, and flow, you'll see my students be able to wield 12 different sentence constructs. And we stole this idea from Strunk and White's text called Write It Right, in which they espouse the idea that you can take a single sentence and rewrite it 12 different ways. So I do a lot of skill and drill with my students with regards to working on their voice, their rhythm, and flow. I have a lot in my YouTube channel with regards to that, so you can check that out. So ultimately, some attempt to manipulate the syntax for better flow, so that we're not using, an abundance of short, simple declarative sentences or independent clauses. And then, as always, the introduction is going to be exactly 4 sentences long, no more, no less. We can invert, which simply means that you're going to begin with the context and the background. You may begin with a hook or an analogy. Synthesis sometimes lends itself to that. But your 4th sentence is going to be the thesis. Sprinkle in that tier 2. Focus on those sentence constructs. And as always, 4 sentences. No more, no less. So let's take a look at a couple. So the greeting I would tell my students really is a nice way to set up your tone, right? So I'm going to show my students a couple of different greetings to I don't know, establish the kind of the attitude or the mood of the piece. So here it is, my first one. Hi, Oscar. Quite simply put, energy begets energy, and all of your negativity is just festering and feeding upon itself. Due to your low EQ, you do not see what you are doing to yourself. In no other words, you are perpetually locked into a cycle of pessimism and doom and gloom. If you're willing to hear me out, I'd like to give you 4 concrete suggestions on how to find more serenity in your life. So, in my just doodling around with this, I found that the inverted thesis worked best for this prompt, and not to like really in like a poker match show all your cards, but just to kind of set the criteria for what's going to come, to have a nice segue into the first premise that's going to be in the the first 3 sentences of the body paragraph. So no need to like totally front load everything and be redundant. But this sentence right here, if you're willing to hear me out, I'd like to give you 4 concrete suggestions, right? So we can anticipate how the line of reasoning is going to unfold in the remainder of the essay. So thesis enough. Here's another one. Hey there, Oscar. So again, anticipate the tone, anticipate the mood. For years and years, you've been the victim of your own bleak and pessimistic thinking. It's about time that someone gives you a proverbial kick to the pants to shake your life up just a bit. Clearly, your current state of doing things Oscar's way isn't working out, and you certainly are not experiencing much joy in your daily circumstances. Hopefully, you'll be receptive to a small piece of advice that I have for you to guarantee a smile on your face. So let's compare them here. So again, don't overdo the vocab, but it's nice. Words like begets is really good. Festering, kind of showing what's going to come. Probably going to have a discussion about EQ, so that source, source H, about the EQ test, source J, maybe it was, is going to come in. And a good balance between the colloquial, the vernacular, the academic. Nice flow with the sentence constructs, lots of variety and variation. Same with this one, bleak, pessimistic. Good words. But then you got the colloquial here about proverbial kick to the pants, shake your life up just a bit. So I really like it when students can teeter-totter the academic, the colloquial, and the vernacular. It gives them a certain flair and spunk that you don't see in a lot of writers. But like this sentence right here, Oscar's way isn't working out. Boom. And you certainly are not experiencing much joy in your daily circumstances. Hopefully, comma. Right? So the ability to do a variety of sentence constructs in order to achieve voice, rhythm, and flow. And every single one that I wrote, I tended to invert it. There seemed to be the need for context and background before saying to someone, hey, your life's all screwed up. I'm going to take over and give you a whole bunch of advice, unsolicited advice, right? So it's just sort of a rhetorical strategy when you're doing an intervention of sorts, to probably give some context and background before you just clobber somebody in the head with your intervention strategies. So that's worth, noting and having a conversation with your students about. So here's one that's more formal. Dear Oscar, enough is enough of your chronic griping. What you are failing to see is that your negativity and everyday foul moods are isolating. Nobody wants to be around a grump, but change must come from within. If you are willing to lend me an open ear and an open mind, I can help you to become a happier version of yourself. So you can see here, just setting up the stage, right? Set the stage up for those first premises where you get into the why reasons. There's no need to spell out all the reasons why in the introduction. So each one, 4 sentences, a little bit of tier 2, balance it out, manipulate those sentence constructs. And here's the thing with this. in this particular synthesis, I'm going to do this early in the academic year. Ultimately, I want my students to practice with their voice a little bit. So I'm opening it up to a first person response. And again, you, the teacher, you're the expert. If you want students to not do that, then you pull the shots, right? But we're writing letters to friends, to a friend. So I'm fine with a first person narrative point of view. So I'm going to tell my guys use it sparingly, but by all means, if you want to, do it. So here's another one. My dear friend. So the tone sort of shifts by these greetings. In effect, I'm staging an intervention through this letter. Do you see the tone? You quite clearly need to change your ways, otherwise you are going to live and die as a miserable grouch. Happiness is an inside job, but I'm afraid that you don't know the way to find serenity in your life. But as your friend, I have a few strategies I would like for you to incorporate into your life, right? Just front load a tad, just a tad bit. So Oscar can anticipate what's coming, right? The line of reasoning is going to be established via this thesis, right? Same approach every single time. Invert, invert, invert for this particular prompt. This one, look at the greeting. Oscar, a change in your life is needed and is needed now. As far as your chronic negativity and pessimism go, it needs to end. It is clear that you are unhappy, if not miserable, but it need not be this way. As your friend, let me give you some square and honest advice that could radically change your perspective on life. So just nuts and bolts, simple. 4 sentences, front load a tad, invert it. Tier 2 sentence constructs. Exactly 4 sentences every single time. So that's a great deal of Bob Rawson. So that, showing students five times how to do it, and then saying, all right, on your mark, get set, go, should demystify the process for them, and they should have a clear understanding of how to execute their own. So the next question is this: how do I write the body paragraphs? And as always, we're going to proceed syllogistically. So given that I'm going to do this early in the academic year, I wanted to show my students a couple of syllogisms, and I'll do the same for you because they're just getting exposure to my templates. It's a little unfamiliar and it's unwieldy at first to learn templates and heuristics when you're learning how to write. So in brief, all body paragraphs can be constructed with the syllogistic method. They can be constructed syllogistically. So not just synthesis, but literary analysis, rhetorical analysis, argument, persuasion, and research. And all it is this, right? It comes from the Aristotelian tradition. It's a mathematical, computative way to sustain your line of reason. So Aristotle called it cogency, to be like supremely locked in logically. So if I were to say, premise 1, arsenic is deadly. Premise 2, my dog ate arsenic. Conclusion, my dog is going to die. I don't think anyone would look at that and say, oh, that's unreasonable, that's ludicrous, what a ridiculous claim and assertion you're making. Like, it's super logical. So ultimately, when our students write, especially synthesis, all 3 components of the syllogism need to be there. And sometime down the road, what I would like to do, especially with my AP language friends, is show you how many sample papers that the College Board has put out for synthesis, for FRQ1, principally all they contain is the second premise. And that's why it seems like students are more or less just regurgitating the sources and putting things in their own words and doing a lot of summation and things of that nature. So the syllogistic method makes sure that the argument stays central, which is in the directions. Your argument must be central. So over and over again, we hear that. So here's what it looks like when we do the syllogistic method for synthesis. The first premise is going to be an argument containing a why reason. So notice in all those introductions, we never stated why. We didn't get into the reasons, right? We just dropped it. Drop the thesis and get out of there. All right. The whys are going to come in the first premise. And I'll model this for you twice. A first premise is going to be 3 sentences long, and you have to get into the why. Why are you giving Oscar this advice? The second premise is the textual support. We know that we need to use it to draw from at least 3 of the sources. So I'll show you how to embed your quotes and teeter-totter balance the quoting and the paraphrasing. And then the conclusion of the syllogistic body paragraph. So I want to be clear on that. The conclusion of the syllogistic body paragraph is where you link back to the prompt, you echo the thesis, and you shake hands with the first premise. I tell my students all the time, the first premise is a promise. You got to go back to that brother and shake his hand in the end. So all of that happens in the final like 2 to 3 sentences of the body paragraph. Good students say this. They anticipate. They say, Mr. Kuhn, our introductions were 4 sentences long, no more, no less. How many sentences should a body paragraph be? And I tell them that's a great question. So ideally, I like to see 10 to 12 sentences. So shooting for the 10 sentence mark. Those little itty bitty 4 or 5 sentence baggers that kids do, there's not enough support or analysis in there to really advance the argument and flesh it out and really hammer home points and develop ideas. So I like to see 10 to 12 sentences. So here is a sample paragraph. So note the first 3 sentences. You got to get into your why reasons. And as a training wheel, as a scaffold, as a guardrail, I tell my students, just say, if you're like a struggling emerging writer and this is, nebulous to you, it's unclear, just say reason why somewhere in your first 3 sentences and articulate your reason why. Ultimately, we want to get them away from that, but it's early in the academic year. I'm fine. They're learning. So to model, I just say, there are a number of reasons as to why you are so unhappy in life. And identifying those reasons is paramount if we are to get you to find more happiness. And then I'm just going to list a couple of things. First, you quite clearly are a negaholic who systematically disqualifies the positive. And second, when you project your thoughts forward into the future, you tend to catastrophize things. All right, so if we put that into the language of a promise, so first premise is a promise. The first thing I want to see an exploration of and some paraphrasing and some quotes is the article that mentions the concept of negaholic, right? Of holicking negativity. The second thing I want to see is this idea of catastrophizing the future. So we're going to need to have plenty of support and analysis for that. Since we mentioned negaholic first, we in the 4th sentence should start there and then bring in catastrophizing the future later on. So second premise, start quoting, start paraphrasing. The second premise begins. Unfortunately, I think you actually have an addiction to your negative thinking in that when a person is not driven by a desire to change something, but instead are driven by an addiction to negativity, they will not be satisfied once a solution is presented that resolves the issue at hand, but will simply find another problem to be upset about. So with quote transitions, I have a simple rule. It's called the 5-word rule. If a student places a minimum of 5 words in front of the quote and keeps the quote small, this one's a little too big. This is a little too unwieldy for me, for my liking. It should sound conversational. So that's from source B. We quote, we got to analyze. One need not look any further than your most recent music video. The chorus and refrain identify the root cause of all of your problems and deep-rooted tendencies to self-sabotage the quality of your life. And then to quote the song, I'm sad because I'm happy, and I'm happy because I'm mad, and I'm mad because it sounds sappy to be happy when you're sad. So that goes to source A. Now let's tie these together. We gotta keep the line of reasoning intact. We still have to talk about negaholicing, but we also need to analyze these lyrics. So this is, some teachers talk about sources talking to each other. Source A and source B need to have a conversation right now, okay? And that's what's going to happen. If we parcel through your diction with any therapist, we'd see that you're one big paradox. You thrive on negativity. In fact, as Bob Blank puts it, you are a tacit disqualifier in that you believe life is one disappointment after another, when in reality it contains its fair share of positivity. Let me give you an example. With your interactions with Big Bird the other day, he invited you to get excited and happy about 3 possible events you have coming up. You immediately put the kibosh on your own opportunity to be happy because a person who falls into catastrophizing future events believes that if anything were to happen, it will be the worst possible outcome. Source C. So why is that quote necessary? Because here you promise to talk about it, catastrophizing the future. So go in the sources and get a quote and a paraphrase to have that all aligned. So we got a lot of support in here, lots of evidence, and we've sustained the line of reasoning. In the end, go shake hands with that first premise, echo the thesis, echo the prompt, link it back to the prompt. Clearly, Oscar, you need to work on being more mindful with regards to where you allow your thoughts to trespass. Being chronically negative is getting you nowhere. I'm hoping that what I am sharing resonates with you. Right. So it's really hard to write this without using the I, and I think it's really good to get students accustomed to using that first person narrative point of view, especially for the Lang teachers. Sometimes in FRQ3, as we know, students talk about themselves, and it's an art, it's a skill that needs to be taught. So a little practice with the synthesis can ultimately segue over into the FRQ3, the argument portion. And for the gen ed teachers, sometimes your kids got to write personally. So it's not a bad idea to get them to practice and do it with a little mentoring. Next question. What do we do next? One body paragraph is done. What do we do next? Simple. Bust out another syllogism. So I would show my kids another full syllogism, and I would just go over it again. We're going to start with an argument containing a why reason. Textual support, teeter-totter balance, the quoting and the paraphrasing. Keep the line of reasoning. Make sure all the quotes are germane to the promise. Link echo, right, in the conclusion. So look at my first 3 sentences. Talk to my students about conjunctions a lot when they transition. So look at the transition here. But breaking long-standing patterns of behavior is not easy. In acknowledging this, there are a few things you can do in the immediacy to begin the process of radically changing the trajectory of your thoughts. First, we need to get to the root cause of your negativity, and then we need to talk solutions. So this sets up the line of reasoning. The root cause, and then solution, cause, solution. So in terms of the second premise, we should go cause, solution. So all of the sources that are up here should be cause. Everything down here should be solution. So I use the word germane with my students all the time. Make sure your quotes and paraphrases are germane to what you promised. So let's see what we can do in the 4th sentence here. Begin the second premise. The thing that is important to remember is that the surface annoyances in your life have deeper roots, and that often they're more like triggers for something deeper, the final drip in a well that now overflows. So that comes from source E. All right, analyze it. We got to stick to source. So it's not the loud noises when what you think you need is silence. It's not the smell of the pizza shop when all you want is to smell trash. Ultimately, we need to learn what sets you off, because getting to know your triggers and why you have them is one of the best ways to help prevent these events from hijacking your mood. Excuse me. So that's from source E as well. All right, so enough of source E. I tell my guys, don't overuse a single source. Here's what I see. You've been stuck in a cycle of negativity pretty much your entire life. For this reason alone, plus the fact that you've had countless friends try to intervene on your behalf, I think that you need to consider that sometimes a bad mood is more than just a bad mood, source F. All right, and again, let's go back to what we were talking about in the introductions. Do you see the vocab? Don't overdo it, but it's academic. Words like trajectory, long-standing, acknowledge. So surface annoyances, right? But you don't want to be total geek out on it, right? You can use some vernacular and colloquial to offshoot all of that. So we went cause or source, cause, right? Cause, source. So now let's move on. Let's get some different quotes. Yes, Oscar, I'm talking about therapy. The biggest thing you need right now is to practice reframing your thoughts. As an example, instead of stressing about a traffic jam, for instance, appreciate the fact that you can afford a car and get to spend a few extra minutes listening to music or the news, accepting that there is absolutely nothing you can do about the traffic. Source F. When one realizes and accepts that they are powerless over most people, places, and things, it can be quite liberating. Further, a therapist can help you to recognize that most of your thoughts are blue and need not be. Source H. All right, got lots of support here. Don't really want to go over, 12 sentences because we can get waylaid and bloviate and break the line of reasoning. Let's go back though. Everything that we quoted and paraphrased, is it tied to the first and tied to the than? It is. It's all tied together. That's perfect line of reasoning. But now we got to link it all back. I know that picking up the phone can be heavy when you're seeking help, so I'm more than happy to come over to assist you in finding the perfect therapist to work with. Your friends, most likely, can uncover the causes of your endless negativity. But for me, at least, I'll also be there for you, my dear friend Oscar. That's a perfect wrap up, right? So keep it gentle at the end. Let them know that this is what you're dropping in terms of advice. So that's how I would do the whole essay, right? Intro, two bodies, conclusion. I didn't show you the conclusion of the essay. Get into that some other time. But to wrap up here, know that my Teach It Right 5-week mastermind is now being offered through the National Writing Project. I'm still the lead teacher of that, and all the perks and benefits of the original 5-week mastermind are still at play, except this. The National Writing Project is a much bigger organization than Christian Kuhn going solo. So the cost is reduced for the 5-week mastermind, greatly reduced. And the National Writing Project is giving 10 credit hours, PD credit hours, for participants that complete the course with me. So we're going to be on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and meet for an hour. And then there's about a hour's worth of work to complete during the week for a total of 10 credit hours. Also note that once the academic year begins, I'll be doing some free webinars with Perfection Learning. And in the fall, I am doing a presentation with NCTE in Anaheim, California. So if you want these slides and the reading packets, feel free to give me an email, or drop me an email at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. To get information on the National Writing Project and the 5-week mastermind, you can go to nwp.org. They have a great website. I also have my own, www.teachinghowtowrite.com, and there's links that can take you to the National Writing Project and a good rundown of everything that is involved in the course. So your pickings, teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com, www.teachinghowtowrite.com, or www.nwp.org. So hope that helps. I hope you really enjoy this unit and you crush it with your students. Be well, happy teaching, happy writing.